exciting. We've returned, the pandas have returned from summer vacation. How do pandas vacation? Any
We just eat lots of I think we eat lots of bamboo and
bamboo? Yes.
maybe spend some time sleeping.
Yes, exactly. And we have as our first guest of whatever the third season, I think, of pandas, because
Yes,
we started in September of 2024.
2023.
2020, that's right, you're right, 2023. And we have as our first guest an esteemed colleague and I hope friend uh, of long standing, Scott DeAngelo. And Scott, why don't you say a little bit about yourself and tell us where you are right now?
Well, thank you, Carmen and Julia. It's great to be with you. It is certainly bringing back a lot of great memories from my early career. Carmen and I connected in the CIA back in, well, I joined in 1985, and we had the opportunity to work in the Office of Leadership Analysis together. I'm currently out in Spanish Fork, Utah.
So,
Um,
where is that in Utah? North, south, east, west?
an hour south of Salt Lake City,
Okay.
central Utah along the Wasatch Front. So we have lots of mountains here.
Hmm.
We've been here almost 14 years now and have found it quite comfortable and a good place for us to be. My background is kind of diverse in that I would say kind of three pillars. One is leadership studies, leadership development, leadership coaching. The other is intelligence analysis, and then finally just working with people in various contexts, including through work or NGOs or civic organizations. And I've been what I consider extremely fortunate to be able to marry up those three interests successfully with varying degrees of emphasis at different times in my professional and personal life. So I may bounce a little bit more into leadership for a while and then back into intelligence and then working with and developing people. It probably wouldn't look very coherent from a standard career development perspective, but it's been an amazing ride. I always
So,
felt like time at CIA, I hit the jackpot. I thought that was probably the perfect career for me in lots of ways that I can go into. But I've also just really valued the various opportunities I've had to work with people, to coach people, and to be hands on in a variety of different settings. Connie and I have been here, like I said, 14 years now, and we love the mix of outdoor life and access to amenities. We're not too far from Salt Lake, so we can get up to things that we typically like to do without too much trouble.
it's great. So, we can edit this out if you don't want to talk about this, but I can't help but mention some of the things I remember most strongly about you, Scott. And um, so poor Scott, and you need to talk about this. Poor Scott was part of the first group I ever managed. And I got stuck in the management, well, not stuck because I loved it, but I entered the management space completely unprepared in kind of classic back then 1980s institutional government style. And I think, what do you think, Scott? Do you think that was pretty typical of most businesses too? That people were just thrown, hey, you seem competent here, and you're in charge of this group now.
Yeah, I think the Peter principle applies in many different settings. We continue to advance
Yes, until we fail.
until we don't.
And I had a group, and they were, I think, with one or two exceptions, quite young.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, really just starting out in their careers. And Scott was one of them. And Scott is was raised a Mormon. Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
And he had not too, not too long before he joined the agency, he had been on a mission.
Yeah.
And we can edit this out if you want, but the story that I remember is that you told me that your mission was in Italy. Is that correct?
Correct.
And
Yes.
that you
That's interesting.
you did okay until you got to the point where you had to tell them they couldn't drink any more red wine.
Yes.
And then it kind of just fell apart. Am I remembering this correctly?
Wonderfully. Yes. Oh, my mission was such a formative experience. And I'll just say a little bit about my
Please,
back.
please, if you're willing to talk about it,
Oh,
absolutely.
sure. Because it actually plays into some of the things I remember from our time together.
Mm.
I grew up in a small town in California, and it was a agricultural slash logging community. And the prospects there were you either went to into construction, logging, or you went off and became a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or something. There wasn't a lot to do. It was a town called Grass Valley. And so I had never really been anywhere until I went to Italy on my mission. This is way back in '77. And I have just vivid memories of getting off the plane in Milan and walking down the gangway onto the tarmac. And there were a line of carabinieri with automatic rifles and German Shepherd guard dogs. And it clicked. Hey, I'm not in Grass Valley anymore. This is different. I had never seen anything like that. And there was a real turmoil going on internationally around the emergence of terrorism, Baader Meinhof, PLO, Brigati Rossi, the Red Brigades in Italy. While I was in Italy, the Red Brigades captured and killed the president of Italy. And just there was a lot of international turmoil, which I had nothing to connect to. I remember standing on a street corner in Torino, and a Communist Party rally was marching down the street, and they were burning Uncle Sam in effigy. And I had no connection to what was driving people. So when I got home, I was really fascinated, wanted to explore what was going on. And at just about that time, the Iran hostage crisis kicked off. And Ted Koppel started his little show that became Nightline. And I remember just staying up late, much later than I should have, being that I was in school, just every night to catch up on what was happening with the hostages. And that's what really triggered my interest in international affairs, international relations, and in understanding the world. So yeah, the mission was fun and informative in so many ways, but it also led me into my career at the agency in some very
Cool.
real
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
Can I ask about this this Office of Leadership Analysis?
Yes.
Did you analyze? I mean, so I think I know the answer, but I'm curious about the secret answer. Because I know institutions have sort of the
Julia's
stated goal.
convinced that there somehow,
I don't mean-
somewhere exists this deep, dark secret CIA that she's read about. And
Oh, I mean,
believes.
we know from history that has happened, right? That it's not it's the church, right? Whatever. Anyway, there are secret things that the CIA has done that haven't been so great, but I'm not talking about that kind of secret. I'm saying every organization has sort of the stated goal of a particular office or department, and then they have sort of the maybe unstated and maybe not even unconscious, maybe it's an unconscious goal. But I just sort of wonder if the Office of Leadership Analysis not only looked at leadership in other countries, which is, I assume, what the mandate was to understand how leadership is working in each country and the interdependencies, but also does it end up as a result of people analyzing leadership, looking internally and looking at the leadership at CIA? I mean, was that something that maybe informally happened? Because one thing I know about Carmen is she really thinks a lot about leadership in the intelligence community itself within the US. And it seems like you can't not apply the principles that you're learning about foreign leaders to the very leadership of the organization that you're in. True, false, weird?
That's a good question. I'm going to let Scott answer it, but I just want to say that's a really good question.
I love the question as well. My perspective and recollection is that we did not shift and turn and focus internally in any sort of organized fashion. That said, once you become a student of leadership, at least my experience, is you begin to apply those lessons, those insights broadly across your universe. This applied particularly to me. We were doing basically trying to do remote assessments of world leaders. And so we would reach out to partners across academia, private sector, to kind of get access to and understand the tools and techniques they use to assess leaders, and then try to apply them in a remote context. And that's where I hooked up for the first time with a group called the Center for Creative Leadership in North Carolina. And I was just fascinated by what they were doing, and I think they speak a lot of truth. And I said to myself, at some point, I want to circle back and reconnect with them. So when I retired in 2012, I was fortunate enough to reconnect with them, join their staff, and actually ran programs for them for over 10 years. So there is that blending, but there was, other than maybe over a cold beverage somewhere sometimes, little application to domestic or our own universe.
Yeah, the office began, I mean, it's so complicated and truly inside baseball. It began as, I think it was called the Office of Central Reference.
Yes.
And it was really an attempt to handle and tag and organize all the information that came into the agency. And there's always a great demand from policymakers to know who they were talking to. They would have a meeting with their counterpart. They wanted to know about this person. So the OCR started hiring analysts who focused on just the individual. And then eventually they sort of reorganized and created a separate office of leadership analysis. And that matured, I would say, pretty rapidly, because it went from just assembling all the biographic facts, which sometimes people just got wrong. They just their reporting was only as good as, so like you could say, oh, this person is fond of bowling, and think of it as American bowling with a bowling ball, but it's actually like English bowling or Italian bowling, with the little lawn thingies. Oh dear. And anyway, so it went from that to then a couple of very smart psychologists, help me here, Terry Bush.
Yeah.
And
Jerry Post was a
Jerry
predecessor.
Post, who started bringing in the psychological elements, which were, I don't know, good or not good, because psychology and psychiatry, as you know, is kind of a controversial field, quite subjective. And then I think, like,
unlike a leadership analysis, which
yes,
is
exactly.
by the
And
way.
yeah, so what makes this person tick, right?
Right.
It's extremely difficult to do that remotely. And we had a separate team that were actually medical doctors who remotely accessed or thought about the health of leaders. And we have interviewed
Yeah, that's right.
Les Pineson. We interviewed him about what he did. So yeah, no, it definitely advanced, and now sadly, I guess it's kind of gone
Mm-hmm.
as the agency reorganized and is now organized around regions, not around disciplines. At least the analytic part, there is no longer a center of excellence on analyzing leaders.
Do you think that, yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, maybe I'm about to say what you were about to say, but do you think that that is sort of a reflection of a different approach instead of like, ooh, we all want to understand this person so we can like get on the same page, a more like assertive approach, like, well, we don't like this person is whoever they are, but we're just going to say our thing. I mean, do you think that's
No,
like
because
an
I don't
anti-diplomatic?
think so, Scott.
Okay.
This reorganization occurred, like 10 to 15 years ago, during the Obama administration. So you can't really, I don't think, connect it to some sort of
I mean,
emergency.
Obama could have been very assertive, but you're saying no, that's not
No,
it.
I don't think that was it. Scott?
Yeah.
I would agree with you, Carmen. I think it's just kind of a natural evolution as the pendulum has swung back and forth from sort of discipline based analysis to regional based analysis. In the early days, we put a lot of time and effort into defining leadership analysis in relation to other disciplines, economic analysis, military analysis, political analysis. What made it different? What made it special? How to organize and manage that. The emphasis has shifted many times over the years. I don't know the current state of things at this moment. I'm sure it still exists, but not in the same fashion that it did
Yeah.
when we were
I mean,
there.
I thought that it's good. It's good when there's a lot of physicists get together and talk. And it's good when they spread out and talk to other disciplines. Both things are good.
Right.
And I think by eliminating the leadership analysis as an office, I think you make it harder to create that center of gravity where everybody talks.
Are
Yeah.
you the
So,
physicists?
sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to get the
I made
analogy.
I made a little jump there and cut jump, I guess. And
Yeah,
so
so what you're saying is like if we remove the physicists, because I started thinking about physicists specifically, but what I think what you're saying is that you need both the people who are experts in different geographic areas to talk to each other about
yeah.
leadership in general, and you need them to talk to people about, only Italy and only
Yeah,
Russia, etc.
exactly,
Okay,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, okay.
So,
That makes a lot of sense. In fact, that sort of lesson feel like could be applied to every organization,
of
right?
course. Yeah.
And but do you think that is the number one lesson? I mean, I'm especially interested, Scott, in your take on this. What is the number one lesson that your work with that office brings to today? Like just information that would be useful, even beyond the intelligence community, but maybe specifically for the intelligence community. What did you learn that needs to be known?
I think, wow, that's such a big question. I think some of the things, lessons learned are this was a fledgling discipline. There was a lot of work, obviously, done in leadership and leadership development through corporate America, through academia.
Can I jump
Um,
in there real quick?
yeah,
40 years ago, I also feel that 40 years ago, there wasn't the same industry about how to be a great boss or how to be a great leader in academia and in the business world either, that it was fledgling there as well. Am I right? Am I wrong?
no, I think that tracks. You were still dealing with, trait theory, the great man theory, the early writings by some of the early thinkers. It's come a long, long way over the last 40 years. That's part of, I think, the benefit and wonder of it, but also part of the challenge of it. Leadership is, and leadership studies are really all over the map right now, and so much good there. But I guess what I was pointing to us a little bit was the importance of understanding context and being willing to look at issues through a variety of lenses. I don't think we could get to a really complete answer on any analytic questions if we only look at it through military or economics. Adding the leadership development simply made all agency projects richer, more useful, and even a subset of that is looking at leadership from a variety of lenses: sociological, anthropological, the environment, political context, needing all of those lenses to give a truer, fuller, richer picture. So I think one of the things I walked away with is the importance of an open mind, being curious and exploring, and not choosing one avenue, however comfortable that may feel to me personally, to try and answer all my questions.
Yeah. But Scott, both you and I were working more or less on the same part of the world, Southern
Mm-hmm.
Africa, and how South Africa ended up transitioning to a new stage, not
Mhm.
solving its problems, because that almost never happens, but just moving to a new phase was almost entirely the result of leadership dynamics. Would
Mhm.
you agree?
Absolutely.
Yes.
You're touching on one of my heroes, Nelson Mandela. Uh,
Yes.
what a personally rewarding and enriching time it was to study and follow Mandela. I'm going to sidetrack for just a second,
Yeah.
tell the Carmen story. Um, I remember when I joined the agency, we weren't far removed from IBM in the white shirts, ties, how you behave and how you acted. And all of a sudden, we had this new manager come into our organization who was not IBM, had a very different perspective, a different persona. One of those areas that stood out to me was specifically on the African National Congress. As you recall, there was a lot of controversy in the US at that time on where does the ANC stand? Are they communists? Are they not communists? Da 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 da. And there was kind of a traditional conservative bias, in my view, against the ANC. And Carmen, you were the first person I met who espoused a different analytic line on the African National Congress. And as a junior analyst, a new analyst, that was revelatory. It was like, hey, it's not only okay, it's a good thing to take a different perspective, be able to defend it, articulate it, but it set such a wonderful analytic example for me that I've kind of hung on to that over the years. So thank you for that,
Well,
and
thank you for saying that, for telling that story. I appreciate it. I know one of the things, since you opened the door to Carmen stories, it will now never close. No. One of the things that I remember was my first management job. And I spent the first 2 weeks in this job trying to act like probably what I thought an IBM manager should act. And I was
Yeah.
miserable. I just hated it. And that second weekend, I remember it as me going actually through some thought work and going, no, I'm going to be myself. And if people don't like that, then screw it. And, I had like a Nerf basketball and I hung it over my door, and people started coming in and playing Nerf basketball and other things. And the consequence of that is that people become more comfortable with you, and you have way more natural conversations with them when it's the end of the day and they're in your office playing Nerf basketball than you can have under any other circumstance.
Right. And if they don't, if the organization isn't, if this organization that is supposed to be the best in the world at human intelligence doesn't get it, that you being yourself is a powerful tool for management, then there's something wrong. But they did get it. So that's pretty well, they got
Yeah,
it. They got it enough.
yeah,
They got it
okay,
enough.
that's true. They got it enough. Scott?
I was just reflecting on the ping pong setup that you brought in.
Oh, I
That
don't even remember that one.
we played ping pongs on Friday afternoons late in the day. So, but I think I love that concept because, leadership is such a big word, big concept, and you can go down so many different avenues. But for me, it comes down to connecting with people and how we connect, how we inspire uh, others and help them be their natural selves. And it was clear. Another lesson I took from you was you were yourself. I would be curious to know, could you have done that the same way as easily in ALA as you did in LDA? Because we were not just floors apart, but we were also
Yes.
in some
So,
ways whole.
at Leadership Analysis, LDA, and I was an analyst in the Office of Africa and Latin American Analysis, which of course have almost nothing in common other than when you put them together, you create an office that's more or less the same size as the other offices. And for some obscure bureaucratic principle known to known only to the ages, it's important for every part of your organization to be roughly the same size. God only knows why. So I came from African and Latin American analysis, and I think a lot of people took a chance on me to make me a team chief. And I think that's a really astute point, Scott. I don't think I could have, uh, I think I would have felt a lot more pressure to be the IBM
Yeah.
branch chief in the other office, the so-called more important office. And I felt, I was in the basement with all the other people in on the ground floor. And I just felt like and I had a great manager at the time who epitomized the IBM look. I mean, he always wore a white shirt and a tie, and yet he totally bought into or approved, or I don't know what the right words were, but he totally loved what I was doing.
Yeah.
It's a mystery.
So that makes me ask back to Mandela, not to make a comparison between Carmen and Mandela, but
Please don't.
but
Uh,
um Scott, you say he's one of your favorite leaders. What did he do right that made that whole thing work out? I mean, that was a very precarious
Very good
situation.
question.
What did he do right and what did he avoid?
I think he started with a firm understanding and commitment to his principles. And that was reflected in his willingness to adopt pre prison um, tactics and techniques that many found objectionable, um, but he felt were necessary to move change. He clung to those principles throughout his time in prison. He remained true to who he was. And upon his release, he simply chose a path of reconciliation based in empathy and love, in understanding and forgiveness that made it okay for people to forgive one another, to move forward and focus on national unity. He exemplified that in his personal life and behavior. I never had the privilege to meet him, would have loved to, but people who did have talked about that. He was very good at orchestrating national symbols of unity and bringing people together. It could have gone so bad in so many different ways. And like Carmen says, they didn't solve all their problems, but wow, what they came out of, and it just, to me, it was a miracle.
Yeah, I agree.
Same.
So but uh, 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 I, it would be remiss if we did not acknowledge, although I'm curious what you think about it, the role of the South African president at the time, F.W. de Klerk, who was a very unlikely, at least in my mind, uh, it was a surprise to me that he took such a brave step to engage with, to recognize the need for a negotiated solution and move forward.
I totally agree. I think this highlights one of the strengths of agency culture at that time. The con- conventional wisdom was de Klerk would never give up power, that the Afrikaners would never give up power. And that was what the sort of mainline analysis was. But there was one analyst, a young lad named Mark, as I recall,
Mark,
who
yes.
he said, "No, I don't see it that way." And the agency allowed space for him to write an alternative view that turned out to be prescient
Yeah,
and
that's right.
spot on the money. I don't think the Clerk has ever gotten really the credit and recognition for that brave step and for what he did. But I was grateful the agency had enough of a flexibility, enough openness to even entertain that
Well,
perspective.
I was Mark's team chief at the time, so
Yeah,
I know intimately
Okay.
the troubles and travails that he went through, and not to get too much inside South Africa, but um, it I had to be the team chief. I had a view. My view was aligned with Mark's, frankly. I thought there was going to be a peaceful negotiated solution much sooner than the conventional wisdom. And, it took a lot for him to get that paper through.
Yeah.
And here, here's the tricky part. I'm like the so-called leader of the team, but I didn't think it was appropriate for me to impose my view and say, I agree with Mark, the paper's going forward, because I believe that would be wrong. That lack integrity, not open to other views. So we somehow had to, it was like putting together an IKEA bookcase. We somehow had to, oh my God, we got an extra screw left. Where do we put it now? Kind of thing. And I remember Mark came to me and told me a story about an analyst that we're not going to name, but that both Scott and I know, who's a very dominant analyst on the issue of South Africa, who, when he read Mark's paper, took Mark out for a walk and told him that he felt personally betrayed
Mm.
that Mark had written that paper. And you know who I'm talking about,
Mm.
Scott. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, being a leader of analysis is really like being an amateur psychologist with the emphasis on amateur.
Mhm.
So pretty.
So, but that seems very, I mean, the reason why that was appalling to you is that was very different from the agency culture, which is that you don't have like loyalties in your thinking,
No, that was kind of
right?
consistent with agency
So
culture.
was there, okay, but so what I'm always hearing from you, see, this is why I'm always surprised that you don't think there's weird stuff that goes on at the agency because you were very different. You were trying to create this culture of open-mindedness, support for lack of putting people in boxes and no loyalism around thinking. Let's explore the information that we have and come to a conclusion that makes sense and that is intuitive and see if we could do the most good that we can in the world. My whole sort of view of the intelligence community is based on that. Now, I understand that you're very different than the culture, but I mean, even what Scott was saying, that there was somewhat of an agency culture that tolerated that because they tolerated you, they tolerated, right? So there's some part of the culture, I don't know whatever happened to it, if it's still there in spades and overtaken the whole culture, or if it's disappeared. But that was like the seed of how it could really be, you could really function well as almost a truly, democratic thinking organization. I don't know.
Scott?
It's kind of a weird paradox in my mind. I don't know how easy it was for you, Carmen, to lead in that organization. I think they've made great strides in being more open minded, more willing to consider alternatives. But some of that seems to come from a technical perspective, tools, techniques that will help us be more open minded. Um, while I was there, it was taking a while to move in that direction on a human level. There was some pretty toxic leadership traits at some of the highest levels in various places that did not tolerate well rebels at work, that did not tolerate well diversity of thought or diversity of anything. So it's kind of an odd paradox for me because I do think the analytic work that the agency has produced over the years has by and large been great, stellar, outstanding, and they've come leaps and bounds in including alternative opinions and views and tolerating that. It took longer, I think, like I said, to bring that uh, onto a human level.
Yeah. I wasn't the only one that thought the way I did. There was a cohort of us that I think had a view of analysis as less black and white and much more colorful than the conventional wisdom. But there's still, like in any organization, academia, any organization, there's still this tendency, if you're a part of the group that has the prevailing line, the conventional wisdom, you will fight off people who are trying to dilute it and arguing against it. So I don't think it's a particular agency problem, although I think given what the agency does, I think it's particularly acute issue for intelligence organizations. So Scott, we got about 15 minutes, and I don't want to let you go without you talking to us about your sort of key leadership takeaways. Now, I have some that I tell people, but I would love to hear yours first. After you tell yours, I'll tell mine, and then Julie, I don't know if you have.
Oh yeah, I'll tell mine, sure.
Yeah, and so you start.
And
by the way, do you think that's a good use of our time that's left?
For me, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that. I'm kind of what I would consider a self-trained leadership student. I don't profess to have been through major leadership training programs. Most of my focus and attention has been on what works, the practical application. So one of my key premises, I'll just say there's two things. One is it comes down to how we treat people, in my mind, and treating people with respect, with connection. People want to be seen and heard, and the more we can do that through various personal behaviors, willing to be vulnerable, becoming good listeners. My success, personally as a leader, has been when I've been able to connect with people and let them feel like I recognize who they are and make space for them. So I think that's really important. The other is that there are just so many different leadership techniques, styles, theories out there. There's no unifying theory of leadership. Some of these things work great in a particular situation, some of them not as great. So I'm always interested in pursuing and knowing about what's out there that I can find applicable and useful in any given situation where I find myself. I'm not going to fall on my sword over any one particular school of thought, any one particular technique, any one particular assessment. I find many of them useful and interesting and illuminating, but there's really, for me, no one size fits all. There's one secret answer.
Yeah. Should I go next or?
Yes.
All right. So I spent, I think, 25 years of my career as a leader at various levels. And I thought a lot about it. And my single favorite line about leadership is from Ron Heifetz, his book, Leadership on the Line. And it's something like a leader, a successful leader, whatever it is, disappoints his followers at a rate they can tolerate. When I heard that line, I love that line. I mean, there's just a lot there, and it speaks a lot to connections with people because you don't know what the rate they can tolerate is unless you know them. And then secondly, it also speaks to that sometimes the leader has to do hard things, but he or she has to do them at a rate they can tolerate. So that's one thing. And then so in total, I have 5 things to say. The second thing I want to say is that when people ask me my management philosophy, I have for about 20 years had a one-word answer: conversation. My management philosophy is conversation. And then the last thing is my experience has led me to distill leadership to three things. What uniquely is the responsibility of the person in the leadership position? Because I've thought about this a lot. And I would say the first one, I think they're in order, but I could put the order differently on any given day. But the first one I always mention is, almost always mention is matching the right person to the right job. I think like 80 to 90% of performance issues in organizations is a mismatch between the individual's talent and what the job requires. And if you get that right, really, the leader can just go take a nap, basically. The second one is if they're not napping, the unique thing a leader can do is assess the health of the network in which their unit is operating. So you're a unit, you're doing X, Y, or Z, but there's a whole kind of thing around you, ecosystem that your unit is in, and how you relate to that ecosystem can get unbalanced, or the ecosystem can change, and all of a sudden you need to do more of this and less of that. And it's hard for all the individuals who are doing their own thing to get that optic, but so presumably that's the unique responsibility of the leader. And then the third, which is very much connected to that one, is anticipation. So, what is the unique thing a leader should be able to do, at least more of, maybe not better than, but more of than everyone else in their unit should be think ahead, anticipation. So, those are my five thoughts about leadership that I've held on to for at least a couple of decades now.
We make an acronym out of them.
Oh no, no, no.
A fun acronym.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'll work on that.
I'll work on that while you
Okay,
talk here.
good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that we could make a fun acronym like no acronym. That'd be a fun one.
Disappointment.
Yeah, CD.
Please.
Okay. I guess I have three things that have bubbled up, and none of them are, I think they're just saying in different words what you both have said, which is appropriate since you both have way more experience in this than I do. But the very first one that comes up that I haven't really talked about before, but really came up when you were talking, Carmen, and then a little when you were talking, Scott, is a big important thing that people don't talk about with leadership is realizing that you actually are the leader. So this has gotten me in trouble many times because I shot up many inches when I was in fifth grade, and I became the tallest
And physically.
in height.
Yes, in
Became
height.
the tallest girl and often the tallest person in the room. And people started looking to me for decision making, what we should do on the playground. And I was like, what's happening? Because I'm just this goofy, nerdy person. And it didn't occur to me for like decades that people see me as a leader. Like they just do biologically. And so that ended up making, at some point, I thought, oh, right, they see me as a leader. And by default, I have to do that. I mean, it's like I'm not taking my responsibility if I don't. That's the role that has been given to me. And I still get in trouble with it. I still sometimes forget that people see that. And recently, a friend, I hope she's still a friend, she got very upset with me because I asked her to offer some pro bono work to this project I was doing. And I thought it was just an ask, but she felt pressure because she sees me as a leader. And so she got mad at me when like I needed more time or I requested more time. And then I thought, oh, she felt unspoken pressure that I didn't even know I was
Right,
giving her.
right.
So it's this awareness of, holy cow, there's this responsibility to leadership, to acknowledge that people see you that way and you have to take responsibility for that. So that's interesting. So it's awareness of the situation. And then I think the next one is that leadership is oscillatory across time and space. So like um, if you're really a gifted leader, you sure have to go with the flow and recognize there are times at which you're not going to be the leader. You're not going to feel like the leader. You're going to be in a situation where you're more like a follower. And that's an oscillation, even with the same group of people, even if you're the de facto leader or you started this company or whatever, it's going to feel more like, oh, I have to follow now. Okay, now, oh, now I'm the leader. Oh, now I have to follow. It'll be like that through time, right, Carmen?
Yeah, if I may interject, I think that's actually not take the actually out because you always say useful things, but it points to something that's often overlooked. I see a lot of leaders get into trouble when they feel that they have to act like a leader at this particular moment. God forbid that people not perceive me as the leader at this moment.
Which is in which situation they will not be perceived as the leader.
Exactly.
So if you don't
Yeah.
have the leadership capacity to be a follower at appropriate times, you're not perceived as leader because you're not sensing the appropriate action.
Right.
Right. And the same thing across not just time, but space, right? So across space there, you're in a different relationship with whomever in a particular company or in a particular organization.
Right.
And so it's oscillatory, and anything that's not oscillatory dies. And so it's what keeps the authenticity of your leadership alive. So that feels true. Yeah. And then the last thing is the thing I always say, which is that people work for love. That's what they work for. They can fool themselves and think they're working for money. They could fool themselves and think they're working to get to some particular goal, but they work for love. If you could create an environment where people feel loved and you demonstrate that you feel love for yourself and others, like boom, great.
Yeah.
Because that's going to go really well.
Right.
And we forget that a lot.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's really important when you're reshaping a government or reshaping an organization, and there's a lot of things that have to change. If you can do that reshaping with love and can help people feel like, I have to dismiss many, many people. This is really hard. And there's great love for the work that you've done, but things have changed and this is the situation. And thank you for your service towards this mission and go with love and find something new. Like what a different message and what a change that could make in terms of how we make change in our organizations. So anyway, these are my thoughts.
Very good. Scott, last words are yours.
The tall girl story reminded me of one of the first interactions I had with Heifetz when he came to LDA. And
this is Ron Heifetz,
the silverback theory of leadership and how people just tend to naturally look to the tall person, the experienced person for leadership. There were some limitations to that, but I think there's actually some real great truth. One of the things that I've been thinking about as we talked was of principles that come out of the Center for Creative Leadership on direction, alignment, and commitment, and how leadership is really a shared process amongst the group in coming to agreement and understanding on the direction we're going, how we're going to align to do the work, and how we're going to committed are we as a group to do that. So it's not so much about a person or a position. It's about a collective working together. And I think your comments on love underscore that tremendously. That commitment isn't to the task or the goal. The commitment is to each other. And that's one of the things I valued highly at the agency is that I got to work with people who were committed to each other and to the mission. So it was a great ride, as I said.
Yeah. That last thing reminded me, one of the visual images that I often have in my head when I'm in a position of authority is that I was carrying the big arrow. You know how when there's a promotion yes. and there's a guy flipping the arrow around, and I must have seen that at one time, and I go, oh, that's what I do. I'm the arrow holder, but I can't be flippant about it. I have to hold the arrow, like here, or get others to tell me where to hold the arrow, point the arrow, right? So I often use that phrase, I'm the arrow holder.
Yeah, and the arrow holder has to be agreed upon. Like if other people don't agree that you're the arrow holder,